The rain hammered against the glass doors of Stirling Tower like bullets, but inside the marble lobby everything gleamed with cold perfection until a woman collapsed on the floor, clutching her unconscious daughter. "Please, please, someone help my baby!" The woman's voice cracked as she cradled the 7-year-old girl in her arms. Her name was Sarah Mitchell, 34 years old, though the exhaustion carved into her face made her look 50. Her clothes were drenched, not just from the storm outside, but from the sweat of desperation. Her sneakers were torn at the seams, held together by duct tape and sheer willpower. The little girl, Emma, lay limp against her mother's chest, her lips pale as paper, her breathing shallow and ragged. Security guard Marcus Washington had seen many things in his 20 years working at Stirling Tower. Hedge fund managers having panic attacks, executives throwing tantrums over cold coffee, even a proposal gone wrong in the fountain outside. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the raw desperation in Sarah Mitchell's eyes. "Ma'am, you can't be here." "This is private property," Marcus started, his protocol training kicking in automatically, but his voice faltered when he saw Emma's small hand fall limp from her mother's grip. "My daughter hasn't eaten in 2 days." Sarah's scream shattered the corporate silence like a grenade. Every conversation stopped, every clicking heel froze mid-step. Even the pianist in the corner, hired to provide ambiance for the building's wealthy tenants, lifted his fingers from the keys. I just need someone to call an ambulance. Please, she's burning up with fever. I can feel her heart racing. Please, I'm begging you." The elevator doors opened with a polished ding that seemed obscene in the moment. Out stepped Victoria Stirling, 41 years old, CEO of Stirling International Properties, one of the most powerful real estate moguls in Manhattan. Her emerald green suit was tailored to perfection, not a single thread out of place. Her auburn hair was styled in an immaculate bob that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent, back when Sarah could afford rent. Diamond earrings caught the lobby's chandelier light, throwing tiny rainbows across the marble floor, where Sarah knelt in a puddle of rainwater and tears. Victoria's Louboutin heels clicked with mechanical precision as she approached. Her assistant, Jennifer, a nervous woman in her late 20s, hurried behind her, tablet in hand, whispering about the afternoon's merger meeting. "What is going on here?" Victoria's voice was ice wrapped in silk. She didn't look at Sarah directly. Not at first. Instead, her eyes scanned the lobby, calculating the damage this scene was doing to her building's prestigious image. A few wealthy residents had stopped to watch. Mrs. Chen from the penthouse had her phone out. This would be on social media within minutes if she didn't handle it. Marcus stepped forward, his protocol training warring with his humanity. "Ms. Stirling, this woman just came in from the street. She says her daughter needs medical—" "I can see what she says." Victoria finally looked down at Sarah, and for a brief moment, just a flicker, something human crossed her face. She saw the desperation. She saw the dying child. She saw herself, maybe, in some parallel universe where things had gone differently, but then her jaw tightened, and the mask of corporate steel slammed back into place. "This is a private building," Victoria said, her voice carrying across the lobby with the authority of someone who'd never been told no in her adult life. "We have protocols. We have liability concerns. If something happens to that child on our property, she's dying." Sarah's voice broke into something primal, something that came from the deepest part of a mother's soul. She looked up at Victoria with eyes that had seen too much suffering. Too many doors slammed in her face, too many nights wondering which bill not to pay so her daughter could eat. Can't you see she's dying? I don't care about your protocols. I don't care about your liability. I just need help." Victoria's assistant, Jennifer, had already pulled out her phone, but Victoria's hand shot out, stopping her. "Put that away." "But Miss Sterling," I said, "put it away." Victoria's eyes never left Sarah's face. "If we call 911, this becomes a public incident. An ambulance outside Sterling Tower, homeless people using our lobby as a shelter. Do you know what that does to property values? Do you know how fast our tenants will demand answers?" Something in the lobby shifted. The other security guard, Thomas, looked at Marcus with disbelief. The pianist had abandoned all pretense of playing and stood with his mouth open. Mrs. Chen's phone was definitely recording now. Sarah's arms tightened around Emma, and tears streamed down her face, mixing with the rain still dripping from her hair. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible now. "Please don't let my baby die because you're worried about property values. Please, I'm begging you. I'll leave. I'll never come back. Just let someone help her. Please." Victoria looked around the lobby, at all the watching faces, at the phones being raised, at the judgment forming in people's eyes. She made a calculation, the same kind of calculation she'd made 1,000 times in boardrooms and negotiation tables. What was the cost-benefit here? What protected her interests? "Marcus," Victoria said coldly, "escort them out. Use the service entrance in the back, away from the main doors." "Miss Sterling," Marcus started, his voice thick with emotion he was trying to suppress. "That's an order. Get them out of here, now, before this becomes a bigger problem than it already is." Sarah's eyes went wide with horror. "No, no, please, my daughter should not be in a private building where you don't belong." Victoria's voice was final, absolute. "There's a public hospital 14 blocks from here. I suggest you start walking." 14 blocks? In this rain? She can barely breathe. Sarah clutched Emma tighter, the little girl's head lolling against her shoulder. Emma's lips were turning blue. "That's not my problem." Victoria turned on her heel, ready to walk away from this inconvenience, this disruption to her perfectly organized day. "Jennifer, let's go. We have a meeting in 10 minutes. But Marcus didn't move. For the first time in 20 years, he disobeyed a direct order. Instead, he knelt down next to Sarah, his knees cracking as they hit the marble floor. "I'm calling 911, he said quietly. "I don't care about the protocol." Victoria spun around, fury flashing in her eyes. "You're fired." "Then I'm fired." Marcus pulled out his phone, his hands shaking but his voice steady. "But I'm not letting this child die in front of me because you're worried about your image." The lobby erupted. Mrs. Chen shouted, "Good for you!" Someone else started clapping. Victoria's perfectly controlled world was crumbling in real time, and she could feel it slipping through her fingers like sand. "Everyone out!" Victoria's voice rose to a pitch no one had ever heard from her before. "This is private property. If you don't live here, get out." But nobody moved. They all stood there, witnesses to something that would be talked about for months, maybe years. The CEO who kicked out a dying child. The woman in the green suit with no heart. The ambulance arrived 7 minutes later, called not by Marcus, who was now being escorted out by building management, but by Mrs. Chen from the penthouse. The paramedics burst through the doors, their uniforms bright against the grey storm outside, and within seconds they had Emma on a stretcher, an oxygen mask over her small face, an IV in her tiny arm. "Is she going to be okay?" Sarah asked, her voice hoarse from screaming, from begging, from the sheer exhaustion of keeping her daughter alive for so long with nothing. "We're doing everything we can," the lead paramedic said. But his eyes told a different story. This child was in bad shape. Really bad shape. As they wheeled Emma toward the doors, Sarah turned back one last time. Victoria stood by the elevator, her face unreadable, her posture perfect, her suit still immaculate. Their eyes met across the lobby. Two women from completely different worlds, separated by money and power and 1,000 different choices. "I hope you never know what this feels like," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. I hope you never know what it's like to watch your child suffer and be treated like trash because you don't have money. I hope your perfect world never falls apart, because when it does, and trust me, it will, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember the day you chose property values over a child's life. Victoria said nothing. She just pressed the button for her private elevator and disappeared behind its polished doors, leaving behind a lobby full of witnesses who would never forget what they'd seen. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the streets clean of everything except the truth. Victoria Sterling's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. She sat in her corner office on the 42nd floor of Sterling Tower, Manhattan's skyline stretching before her like a kingdom she'd built with her own hands, and watched her perfectly constructed world begin to crack. The first notification came at 3:47 p.m. By 4:15 p.m., her phone was a constant vibration of incoming messages, tags, and alerts that made her want to throw the device through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Ms. Sterling, we need to talk about damage control. Jennifer stood in the doorway, her face pale, her tablet clutched against her chest like a shield. It's everywhere. Show me. Victoria's voice was calm, but her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her laptop. The video was already at 2 million views. Mrs. Chen from the penthouse had filmed everything, every word, every moment, every soul-crushing second of Victoria's cold refusal to help a dying child. The caption read, "Billionaire CEO kicks out starving mother and dying child from her building. This is what greed looks like." Victoria watched herself on screen, and for the first time in years, she felt something she'd almost forgotten: shame. The woman in the emerald suit looked like a monster. Her voice, so measured and controlled in person, sounded cruel when played back. Her reasoning about property values and liability made her sound like a cartoon villain. The comments section was a flood of rage. This woman has no soul. How does someone become this heartless? I hope karma destroys her. Someone find out what happened to that little girl. Victoria closed the laptop with more force than necessary. Call our PR team, now, and get our lawyers on the phone. I want that video taken down for... We can't. Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. It's protected speech, public interest, and even if we could... She hesitated, then continued. Ms. Sterling, there are 17 different versions of it now, different angles. The pianist filmed it. One of the residents going to the gym caught the end of it. Even if we take down one, 10 more will appear. Victoria stood and walked to the windows, her reflection ghost-like against the cityscape. She was 41 years old and had spent the last 2 decades building an empire. Sterling International Properties owned 37 buildings across Manhattan, each one a testament to her ruthless business acumen. She'd fought her way up from nothing, from a childhood in foster care, from sleeping in her car during business school, from every man who told her she'd never make it in real estate. She'd sacrificed everything to be here: her marriage, her friendships, her connection to anything soft or vulnerable. And now, one moment of calculation was threatening to destroy it all. What about the child? Victoria asked, still staring at her reflection. The girl, Emma, was it? Jennifer scrolled through her tablet. According to the paramedics' report that was leaked online, she's in critical condition at Mount Sinai. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, and pneumonia. They're saying if the ambulance had arrived 10 minutes later, she might not have made it. Oh, something twisted in Victoria's chest. She pushed it down immediately. Emotion was weakness. Emotion was what got you destroyed in business. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. And the mother? Sarah Mitchell, 34, former graphic designer, lost her job 18 months ago when her company downsized. She'd been living in her car with Emma, trying to keep her daughter fed while looking for work. She has a degree from Parsons School of Design. Jennifer paused, her voice catching. She used to work for Sterling International 6 years ago. She was one of our junior designers before we outsourced that entire department to save costs. Victoria turned sharply. What? You signed the termination papers yourself, Miss Sterling. It was part of the 2018 restructuring. We let go of 47 employees to increase profit margins by 18% that quarter. The room felt suddenly smaller. Victoria remembered that quarter. She remembered the board meeting where she'd presented the numbers, where she'd been praised for her decisive leadership. She remembered the stock price jump. She didn't remember the faces of the people she'd fired. She never did. Her phone rang. The number showed her mother's retirement home in Florida. Victoria? Victoria, darling, I just saw the most awful video online. Someone sent it to me. They're saying terrible things about you. Tell me it's not true. Tell me you didn't actually... I have to go, Mother. Victoria hung up before the conversation could continue. Her mother's disappointed voice was something she'd spent her entire adult life trying to escape. By 6 p.m., the story had been picked up by local news. By 8 p.m., it was trending nationally. By 10 p.m., Victoria Sterling was the most hated woman in America. The news anchors dissected every second of the video. Social media exploded with hashtags, Sterling heartless, boycott Sterling, justice for Emma. Someone had even created a GoFundMe for Sarah Mitchell's medical bills, and it had already raised $400,000. Victoria sat in her empty penthouse apartment that night, a glass of wine untouched on the marble counter. Her apartment was a masterpiece of modern design, all clean lines and expensive art, and perfect silence. She decorated it herself, choosing every piece to reflect success, power, control. But tonight, it felt like a mausoleum. Her phone rang again. This time it was Richard Pembroke, chairman of her board of directors. Victoria, we need to have a very serious conversation about your position with the company. Richard, this will blow over. It always does. People have short attention spans. This isn't blowing over. Richard's voice was grave. We've had 12 major clients pull their contracts today. 12. The Vanderbilt family is threatening to sell their penthouse. The Morgans want out of their lease. Our stock dropped 7% in after-hours trading. 7%, Victoria. That's $42 million in market cap gone because of one video. So we issue a statement. We make a donation to a children's charity. We need you to step down. Silence. The kind of silence that comes before an earthquake. I built this company, Victoria said, her voice dangerously quiet. I took Sterling Properties from 3 buildings to 37. I increased our valuation by 350%. You're going to throw me out because of one mistake? It's not just the video, Victoria. It's what the video represents. It's the culture you've created here. Do you know what people are saying? They're saying Sterling International has always been heartless, and now they finally have proof. Employees are coming forward with stories about how you treat people. Former contractors are talking about how you crushed small businesses. This isn't going away with a press release. Victoria's hand tightened around her phone. So, what are you saying? I'm saying you have a choice. You can resign voluntarily, take a severance package, and try to rebuild your reputation. Or we can vote you out at an emergency board meeting tomorrow, and you leave with nothing but the clothes on your back and a scandal that will follow you forever. You're giving me until tomorrow? I'm giving you until morning. 9 a.m. Make your choice. Richard hung up. Victoria stood there in her perfect apartment, in her perfect building, in her perfect life that was suddenly crumbling like a house built on sand. She walked to her home office and pulled out a file she kept in her desk drawer, one she never looked at because it represented everything she'd tried to leave behind. Inside were old photographs. Victoria, at 7 years old, standing outside a foster home in Queens. Victoria at 12, holding a sign that read "Will work for food" because the foster family she was with didn't feed her enough. Victoria at 16, sleeping on subway trains because it was safer than the group home. She clawed her way out of that life by being harder than everyone else, by being smarter, by never ever showing weakness, by never letting anyone see her as that hungry, desperate girl again. And now, 25 years later, she'd looked into the eyes of another hungry, desperate woman and seen nothing but an inconvenience. Victoria's phone buzzed one more time. It was an email from someone named Marcus Washington, the security guard she'd fired. The subject line read, "You should know what happened next." She opened it. "Miss Sterling, I don't expect you to care, but I thought you should know. Sarah Mitchell spent the entire night at Mount Sinai Hospital, sitting by her daughter's bedside. Emma's stable now, thanks to the doctors and the GoFundMe donations, but Sarah still hasn't eaten. She gave her meal voucher to another mother in the children's ward whose son has cancer. When I asked her why, she said, 'Because that's what we do. We help each other, even when no one helps us.' I've been a security guard for 20 years, and I've worked for dozens of wealthy people. But I've never seen the kind of grace Sarah showed in your lobby today. She didn't curse you. She didn't attack you. She just asked for help for her child, and when you refused, she still walked out with her dignity intact. You fired me today, and honestly, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Because I don't want to work for someone who's forgotten what it means to be human. Marcus." Victoria read the email 3 times. Then she closed her laptop, walked to her bedroom, and looked at herself in the full-length mirror. The woman staring back was wearing a silk robe that cost $3,000. Her skin was flawless, maintained by monthly facials and the best dermatologists money could buy. Her hair was perfect. Her nails were perfect. Everything was perfect. Except the person inside. The rain that had started that afternoon continued through the night, hammering against her penthouse windows like an accusation. Victoria lay in her king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Emma's pale face, Sarah's desperate eyes, Marcus's disappointment. At 3 a.m., she made a decision. At 6 a.m., she was standing outside Mount Sinai Hospital, still wearing yesterday's clothes, her hair uncombed for the first time in a decade. She didn't know what she was going to say. She didn't know if Sarah would even see her, but she knew that if she didn't try to make this right, she would become the monster everyone already thought she was. And Victoria Sterling had spent her entire life fighting monsters. It was time to stop becoming one. The fluorescent lights in Mount Sinai Hospital's pediatric wing hummed with a sound that Victoria had never noticed before, probably because she'd never spent time in a place like this. Everything here was the opposite of her world. The floors were clean but worn. The walls were painted in cheerful colors that couldn't quite hide the institutional gray beneath. Parents slept in uncomfortable chairs, their faces etched with worry that no amount of money could erase. Victoria stood outside room 4C for 20 minutes before she found the courage to knock. When Sarah opened the door, her face went from exhaustion to shock to something harder than stone in the span of 2 seconds. "You." The single word carried the weight of 1,000 accusations. Sarah stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind her, careful not to wake Emma. She was wearing the same damp clothes from yesterday, now dried and wrinkled. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but there was something in her posture that hadn't been there in the lobby, a dignity that came from surviving the worst and still standing. "I know you don't want to see me," Victoria began, her carefully prepared speech dissolving the moment she looked into Sarah's eyes. "I know I have no right to be here, but I needed to..." "To what?" Sarah's voice was quiet, but sharp as a blade. to apologize, to make yourself feel better, to save your reputation now that the whole world knows what kind of person you are? All of that, Victoria admitted, the honesty surprising even herself. And none of that. I don't know, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about what I did, about what I almost... Her voice cracked. How is Emma? Why do you care? Sarah crossed her arms, a defensive gesture that Victoria recognized because she'd done it 1,000 times in boardrooms when she felt cornered. Yesterday, you couldn't get us out of your building fast enough. Today, you're here asking about my daughter, like we're old friends. We're not friends. We could never be friends after what I did. Victoria's hands trembled, and she clasped them together to stop it. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry, and I know that doesn't change anything. I know it doesn't take back what happened, but I'm here anyway because the video made you look bad? Sarah's laugh was bitter. Because your company is losing money? Because the board is probably forcing you out? I saw the news this morning, Victoria. The whole world saw it. You're here for damage control, not because you actually care. The use of her first name hit Victoria like a slap. You remember me. Of course I remember you. Sarah's voice dropped lower, heavy with years of suppressed anger. You fired me 6 years ago. You signed the papers that ended my career at Sterling International without ever looking at my face. Do you know what that did to my life? I had just found out I was pregnant with Emma. I had medical bills, I had rent, and you eliminated my entire department with a stroke of your pen because it improved your profit margins by 18%. Victoria felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. That's different. Sarah's eyes blazed with an intensity that came from years of swallowing her truth. You didn't want to know about the 47 people whose lives you destroyed that quarter. You didn't want to know that I spent 3 months sending out resumes before my savings ran out. You didn't want to know that I had to move into a smaller apartment, then an even smaller one. Then finally into my car because I couldn't afford rent and daycare and food all at the same time. Sarah, you didn't want to know that I sold everything I owned except my laptop and my portfolio, hoping I could freelance my way back to stability. You didn't want to know that I took jobs designing flyers for $20 just to buy Emma diapers. You didn't want to know any of it because knowing would make you feel something, and feeling things isn't good for business, is it, Victoria? The hospital corridor suddenly felt too small, too bright, too honest. Victoria had spent 20 years building walls around herself, and Sarah was tearing them down with every word. You're right, Victoria whispered. You're absolutely right about all of it. I don't want to be right. Sarah's voice broke, tears finally spilling over. I wanted help. Yesterday in your lobby, I didn't want to be right about who you were. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted you to see my daughter dying and feel something human. I wanted you to prove that people with power and money aren't all monsters. But you couldn't even do that. A nurse walked by, glancing at them curiously. 2 women who couldn't look more different, one in yesterday's designer suit that still cost more than most people's monthly rent, the other in clothes that had been worn for 3 days straight, standing in a hospital hallway at 6 in the morning, connected by a moment of cruelty that had changed both their lives. Emma's stable, Sarah said finally, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. The doctors say she's going to recover. The pneumonia was bad, but they caught it in time. Thanks to Marcus and Mrs. Chen and everyone who helped us despite you, the GoFundMe has raised enough money to cover her medical bills and get us into temporary housing. People I've never met have sent money, food, clothes, job offers. Strangers showed more compassion in 24 hours than you showed in 20 seconds. I know. Do you? Sarah stepped closer, and Victoria resisted the urge to step back. Do you really know what it's like to have nothing? To watch your child go hungry because you can't afford food? To choose between gas for your car and medicine for your kid? To sleep in parking lots because it's safer than shelters? Do you know what that does to you? How it breaks something inside that never quite heals? Yes. The word came out before Victoria could stop it. I do know. Not recently. Not for a long time. But yes, I know exactly what that feels like. Sarah's anger faltered for the first time. What? Victoria looked down at her hands, hands that now wore a Cartier watch and carried a Hermes bag, but had once been too small to reach the top shelf where foster parents hid food from the kids they were supposed to care for. I grew up in foster care, Victoria said quietly. 7 different homes before I aged out at 18. Some of them were okay. Most of them weren't. I know what it's like to go to bed hungry. I know what it's like to wear clothes that don't fit because they're hand-me-downs from kids you've never met. I know what it's like to feel invisible, disposable, like you don't matter to anyone in the entire world. Sarah's expression shifted, confusion mixing with her anger. I spent my 16th year sleeping on subway trains, Victoria continued, the words spilling out like a confession she'd held back for decades. During the day, I went to school. At night, I rode the trains because it was warmer than the group home and safer than the streets. I studied for my SATs under fluorescent lights at 2 a.m. while drunk passengers yelled and slept around me. I got into business school on a full scholarship, and I thought I'd made it. I thought I'd escaped. But you didn't, Sarah said softly. No, I just became a different kind of hungry. Instead of being hungry for food, I was hungry for success, for money, for power. For proof that I wasn't that invisible girl anymore, and somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to actually be hungry. I forgot what it felt like to be desperate. I forgot... Victoria's voice cracked again. I forgot how to see people like me, like I used to be, like you. The silence between them was different now. Not comfortable, but not hostile either. It was the silence of 2 women looking across an impossible divide and recognizing something familiar in each other's eyes. That doesn't excuse what you did, Sarah said finally. I know, nothing excuses it, but I'm not here for excuses. I'm here because I need to make this right, and I don't know how. You can't make it right. Sarah's voice was firm, but not cruel. You can't undo the last 6 years of my life. You can't give me back the career I lost, or the apartment I loved, or the stability Emma deserved. You can't erase the nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering how I was going to keep my daughter alive. You can't make any of that right. Then what can I do? Sarah looked at her for a long moment, really looked at her, seeing past the expensive suit and the perfect hair to the scared girl underneath who'd built an empire just to prove she mattered. You can do better, Sarah said simply. Not for me, not to fix your reputation, but because it's the right thing to do. You can look at the next Sarah Mitchell who walks into your building and see a human being instead of a liability. You can remember that every person you fire has a face and a family and a future you're destroying. You can stop being the woman you became and start being the woman you were supposed to be. Victoria nodded, tears streaming down her face now, not caring that a CEO wasn't supposed to cry in public. The board is voting me out this morning. Good. The word should have hurt, but it didn't. It felt like the first honest thing anyone had said to Victoria in years. I deserve it, Victoria admitted. I deserve all of it. The video, the backlash, losing everything. I deserve it because I stopped seeing people as people. I stopped remembering where I came from. I stopped being human. Then start remembering, Sarah said. Start being human again. Not because a video went viral, not because you're losing your company, but because that's who you should have been all along. The door to room 4C opened, and a small voice called out, "Mommy!" Sarah turned immediately, her entire demeanor changing from warrior to caregiver in an instant. "I'm here, baby. Mommy's right here." Emma appeared in the doorway, tiny in her hospital gown, an IV still attached to her arm. Her color was better than yesterday, her eyes clearer. She looked at Victoria with the innocent curiosity of a child who didn't understand adult complications. "Who's that lady, Mummy? Why is she crying?" Sarah glanced back at Victoria, and in that moment she made a choice that Victoria would never forget. She could have told Emma the truth, that this was the woman who'd kicked them out, who'd almost let Emma die. She could have used this moment to punish Victoria further. Instead, she said, "That's someone who made a mistake, sweetheart, and now she's trying to learn from it." Emma looked at Victoria with those big, innocent eyes. "My teacher says everyone makes mistakes. That's how we learn to be better." Victoria knelt down, bringing herself to Emma's eye level. "Your teacher is very smart, and so are you. Are you going to be better now?" Emma asked with the straightforward honesty only children possess. "I'm going to try," Victoria whispered. "I'm going to try very, very hard." Emma smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Okay, that's good." Sarah ushered Emma back into the room, but before she closed the door, she turned back to Victoria one last time. "Don't come back here," Sarah said quietly. "We don't need your money or your apologies. But if you really want to make a difference, if you really want to change, then go out there and help the next person before they end up like me. Help them before they're desperate. Help them before they're sleeping in their car. Help them while they still have hope." "I will," Victoria promised. "I swear I will." "We'll see," Sarah said, and then she closed the door. Victoria stood in that hospital corridor for a long time after, listening to the sounds of other families dealing with their own crises, watching nurses move efficiently from room to room, seeing the world she'd ignored for so long because it didn't fit into her perfectly controlled narrative. At 8:45 a.m., she walked into the board meeting and resigned before they could vote her out. She gave up her severance package and asked that it be donated to families experiencing homelessness. She issued a statement that didn't try to excuse her behavior, but acknowledged it fully and promised to do better. The internet still hated her. The news still talked about her. Her name would forever be associated with that video, but for the first time in 25 years, Victoria Sterling looked at herself in the mirror and recognized the person staring back. Not the CEO. Not the billionaire, not the woman in the green suit. Just a girl from Queens who'd forgotten who she was and was finally ready to remember. 6 months later, the rain returned to Manhattan. Sarah Mitchell stood outside the newly opened Second Chances Community Center in Brooklyn, watching the drops create ripples in the puddles that formed on the sidewalk. The building wasn't fancy, just a renovated warehouse in a neighborhood that gentrification hadn't quite reached yet. But it was warm, welcoming, and full of hope. "Mommy, can I go play with the other kids?" Emma tugged at Sarah's hand, her eyes bright with the health and happiness that had seemed impossible half a year ago. Her cheeks were full now, rosy with color. Her smile came easily. She wore a new winter coat, purple, her favorite color, and light-up sneakers that she was absolutely obsessed with. "Go ahead, baby. Stay where I can see you." Sarah watched Emma run toward the indoor playground, where other children laughed and played, their parents watching from comfortable chairs nearby, cups of free coffee in their hands. This was what the center was about. A safe space. A warm space. A space where families who were struggling could come without shame, without judgment, without someone like Victoria Sterling looking at them as if they were problems to be solved, rather than people to be helped. "She looks happy." The voice came from behind Sarah, and she turned to see Marcus Washington, the security guard who'd lost his job because he chose humanity over protocol. He was wearing a navy blue polo shirt with Second Chances Staff embroidered on the chest. In his hands, he carried 2 cups of hot chocolate. "She is happy," Sarah said, accepting the cup gratefully. "We both are." "Finally." Marcus nodded toward the far corner of the room where a woman was setting up easels and art supplies. "The art therapy program starts next week. 12 families signed up already." "That's wonderful." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but these were good tears. Grateful tears. "I never thought we'd actually pull this off." "You pulled it off. You and all those people who donated to your GoFundMe. $400,000 became a movement." Marcus took a sip of his hot chocolate. "Speaking of which, she's here." Sarah's stomach clenched. "Already?" "Came in through the back entrance like you asked. She's in the office waiting." For 6 months, Sarah had avoided Victoria Sterling. They'd communicated only through lawyers and intermediaries, as Victoria had insisted on being part of funding the community centre. Sarah had resisted at first, not wanting to accept anything from the woman who'd caused her so much pain. But eventually, she'd realised something important. Victoria's money, earned through years of ruthless business practices, could be transformed into something beautiful, something redemptive, not for Victoria, but for all the families who needed help. That was the real revenge, not destruction, but transformation. Sarah walked through the community centre, past the job training room where people practiced interview skills, past the childcare area where working parents could leave their kids for free, past the food pantry stocked with fresh groceries instead of just canned goods. Every room represented a chance that Sarah wished she'd had 6 months ago. Every service was designed by someone who understood what it meant to struggle because they'd struggled themselves. Victoria stood in the small office, looking out the window at the Brooklyn street below. She'd changed. Her hair was shorter, less perfect. She wore jeans, actual jeans, and a simple sweater. No designer suit, no expensive jewelry, no armor. "Sarah." Victoria turned, and the uncertainty in her voice was jarring, coming from someone who'd once commanded boardrooms with absolute confidence. "Thank you for seeing me. I know you didn't have to." "You're right, I didn't." Sarah closed the door behind her and leaned against it, arms crossed. 6 months hadn't erased the hurt. Time didn't work that way, but it had given her perspective. "Why are you really here, Victoria? We've handled everything through lawyers. The centre is funded. Your part is done." "I wanted to see it." Victoria's hands fidgeted with the strap of her simple canvas bag, such a far cry from the Hermes bags she used to carry. "I wanted to see what my money became when it was used for something good instead of just making more money. And it's beautiful." Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "It's everything I should have built instead of towers full of luxury apartments that only rich people can afford. This is real." Sarah studied her carefully. The internet had tracked Victoria's fall from grace with the same enthusiasm it had tracked her rise to power. After resigning from Sterling International, Victoria had sold her penthouse, her car collection, most of her possessions. She'd taken a job as a consultant for non-profit housing organizations, using her real estate expertise to help rather than exploit. The transformation had been public, painful, and, according to social media, possibly performative. But standing here now, looking at Victoria's face, Sarah saw something genuine, something broken that was slowly healing. "Do you want a tour?" Sarah asked quietly. Victoria's eyes widened with surprise. "You'd do that?" "I'd do it for the centre, not for you. People should see what their donations built, even people who've made terrible mistakes." They walked through the building together. An awkward silence between them at first, but as Victoria saw each room, each service, each family finding help and dignity, something in her expression shifted. She stopped in the art therapy room, running her fingers over the easels. "I used to draw," Victoria said softly. "When I was in foster care, I'd draw houses. Perfect houses with families inside, everyone smiling. I thought if I could just draw them perfectly enough, maybe I'd end up in one of those houses." She laughed bitterly. "Instead, I grew up and built buildings that only people who already have perfect families could afford." "It's never too late to build something different," Sarah said. They stopped in the childcare room where Emma was playing with blocks, constructing an elaborate tower with intense concentration. Victoria watched her through the window, and tears began rolling down her face. "She's so beautiful," Victoria whispered. "So alive. When I think about how close I came to—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "But you didn't," Sarah said firmly. Marcus called the ambulance. "Mrs. Onchen recorded the video. Strangers donated money. Emma survived not because of you, but despite you. That's the truth, Victoria, and you need to live with that truth." "I know. I live with it every day." Victoria wiped her eyes. "I see her face every time I close my eyes. I see your face begging me for help. I see the person I became, and I—" She took a shaky breath. "I don't know how to forgive myself." "That's not my job," Sarah said, not unkindly. "I'm not here to give you absolution or make you feel better about what you did, but I can tell you this: guilt without action is just self-pity. If you really want to change, if you really want to make amends for the life you lived, then stop waiting for forgiveness and start earning it every single day with every decision you make." Victoria nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. "That's what this is, isn't it? The center. Your revenge that everyone talked about online. This is it. What did you expect? That I'd destroy your company, ruin your reputation beyond what you already did yourself? Drag you through the courts?" Sarah shook her head. "That's not revenge. That's just perpetuating the same cruelty you showed me. Real revenge is proving that I'm better than you were, that I can take the worst moment of my life and turn it into something that helps hundreds of other families avoid the same fate." "You succeeded." Victoria's voice was thick with emotion. "You turned your pain into purpose. You took nothing and built something beautiful. You're everything I pretended to be." "I'm not perfect, Victoria. I'm angry. I'm still healing. There are nights when I can't sleep because I remember how close I came to losing Emma. There are days when I see women in expensive suits and feel rage boil up inside me. But I choose every day to channel that rage into building instead of destroying. That's the difference between us." They walked back to the main room where families gathered, talking and laughing, finding community in their shared struggles. A mother, Sarah recognized from the homeless shelter she'd stayed in, was filling out a job application, her toddler playing safely nearby. A father was attending a financial literacy workshop, learning how to manage the paycheck from his new job. An elderly woman was picking up fresh vegetables from the food pantry, her dignity intact because everything was presented with respect rather than charity. "This is what power should look like," Sarah said quietly. "Not penthouses and private helicopters, not making money off people who can barely afford rent. Real power is giving people the tools to lift themselves up. Real power is building something that lasts beyond your own ego." Victoria watched a young woman, maybe 22, 23, talking with a job counselor. The girl's face lit up as the counselor showed her something on the computer screen, probably a job posting or a training program. Victoria saw herself in that girl's hopeful expression. She saw the person she could have been if someone had helped her instead of just using her hunger as motivation to climb higher. "I want to do more," Victoria said suddenly. "Not just money. I want to use everything I learned in real estate to help. I want to work with the city to create more affordable housing. I want to consult for organizations like yours. I want to... Stop. Sarah held up her hand. Stop trying to fix everything at once. Stop trying to become a saint overnight because you think it'll erase what you did. Just do the next right thing, and then the thing after that, and the one after that. That's how you change, one decision at a time. Victoria nodded slowly, absorbing the wisdom. Will you tell me if I'm doing it right, if I'm really changing and not just performing change? No, Sarah said firmly, because I'm not your moral compass. I'm not your accountability partner. I'm not your redemption arc. I'm just a woman who survived what you did to me and chose to build something good from the ashes. What you do with the rest of your life is your choice, not mine. That's fair. Victoria took a deep breath, accepting the boundary. Thank you for showing me the center, for letting me see what change actually looks like. As Victoria turned to leave, Emma ran up, her face flushed from playing. She looked at Victoria with recognition flickering in her eyes. Children never forget faces, even faces they've only seen once in their darkest moments. "You're the crying lady from the hospital," Emma said with innocent directness. Victoria knelt down, bringing herself to Emma's level just as she had 6 months ago. But this time her eyes were clear, honest. "Yes, I am. How are you feeling, Emma?" "I'm good. I'm not sick anymore. And we have a house now. Well, it's an apartment, but Mummy says it's our house because we're safe there." Emma's enthusiasm was infectious. "Are you still trying to be better?" The question hit Victoria like a freight train. Out of the mouths of babes came the most devastating honesty. "Every day," Victoria whispered. "I'm trying every single day." "That's good," Emma smiled, then ran back to her friends, the interaction already forgotten in the beautiful simplicity of childhood resilience. Victoria stood slowly, and Sarah saw tears streaming down her face again. "She forgave me without even knowing she did it." "Children are better at that than adults," Sarah said. "They don't hold grudges, they don't understand revenge, they just know when someone is trying to be kind." She paused, then added more gently, "But Emma's forgiveness doesn't absolve you. You understand that, right?" "I understand." Victoria wiped her eyes. "I'll go now. But Sarah, thank you. Not for forgiving me because you don't have to, but for showing me what I should have been all along. For proving that the girl I used to be, the hungry, scared girl from Queens, she's still worth something. She was always worth something. I just forgot." After Victoria left, Sarah stood at the window and watched her walk down the Brooklyn street, shoulders hunched against the rain, looking small and human in a way she never had in that marble lobby 6 months ago. Marcus came to stand beside her. "Do you think she's really changed?" he asked. "I don't know," Sarah answered honestly. "Maybe, maybe not. But that's not my concern anymore. My concern is this." "No," she gestured to the community center, to all the families finding help, to all the second chances being given. "This is my revenge, not destroying her, but proving that people like us, people who've been knocked down and counted out, we can build something that matters. We can be more than our worst moments." "She funded a lot of this," Marcus pointed out gently. "Doesn't that count for something?" "It counts for her trying, and trying matters. But money is easy when you have it. Real change is harder. Real change is looking at every person like they matter, even when there's no camera recording you, even when there's no viral video forcing you to care. Real change is choosing humanity over profit every single time, not just when the world is watching." Emma ran up again, this time with a drawing she'd made. It showed stick figures, a mommy, a little girl, and surprisingly, a third figure with yellow hair that could only be Mrs. Chen from the penthouse, who'd visited them twice since the incident. "Look, Mummy, I drew our family." Sarah's heart swelled. "It's beautiful, baby. Should we hang it up?" "Yes, in our house, so we remember." As Emma ran off to play more, Sarah realized something profound. This was her real revenge. Not against Victoria specifically, but against every system that had failed her. Every door that had been closed, every person who'd looked at her and seen a problem instead of a person. Her revenge was surviving, thriving, building, helping others so they didn't have to suffer like she had. That evening, as Sarah locked up the community centre and took Emma home to their small but warm apartment, paid for by GoFundMe donations and her new job as the centre's director, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. The viral video was still online. People still recognized her sometimes on the street. The story of the starving mom kicked out by CEO would probably follow her forever, but it no longer defined her. She'd taken the worst moment of her life and transformed it into a legacy of hope. Meanwhile, across the city, Victoria Sterling sat in her modest studio apartment. No penthouse, no panoramic views, just a simple space in a middle-class neighborhood, and made a list, not of business deals or profit margins, but of ways she could help, organizations to volunteer with, skills she could teach, connections she could leverage for good instead of personal gain. On her fridge, held up by a simple magnet, was a printed copy of Emma's innocent question, "Are you going to be better now?" Every morning, Victoria read those words, and every morning she tried to answer yes, not with words, but with actions, small ones at first, volunteering at a food bank, tutoring kids in financial literacy, using her real estate knowledge to help non-profits find affordable spaces. The internet didn't forgive her, maybe it never would. But she wasn't doing it for the internet. She was doing it for the girl she used to be, and for every person who reminded her of that girl. 6 months became a year. 1 year became 2. The Second Chances Community Centre expanded, helping hundreds of families find their footing. Sarah became a sought-after speaker on poverty, resilience, and community organizing. Emma grew healthy and strong, her childhood trauma fading into a story her mother would someday tell her about the importance of helping others. And Victoria? She never became famous again. She never rebuilt her empire. But she built something more valuable, a quiet life of service, a life where she measured success not by bank accounts, but by the number of people she helped. A life where she remembered every single day what it felt like to be powerless, and used her remaining power to lift others up. They never became friends, Sarah and Victoria. The wound was too deep for that. But at the 5-year anniversary of the Second Chances Community Centre, when Sarah stood at the podium to give a speech, she saw Victoria in the back row, sitting quietly among the crowd. Their eyes met briefly. Sarah gave a small nod. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. Recognition that people could change, that redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but about building a better future, one choice at a time. And in that moment, both women understood something profound. Revenge wasn't about destruction. Real revenge was about transformation, taking pain and turning it into purpose, taking the worst of humanity and proving that humans could still choose to be better. That was Sarah Mitchell's revenge. She survived, she thrived. She built something beautiful from the ashes of her worst day, and that was more powerful than any punishment could ever be. The end years later, Emma would ask her mother, "Mommy, do you ever think about that day, the day we almost didn't make it?" And Sarah would smile, holding her daughter close, and say, "Every day, baby, I think about it every day, because it taught me that our worst moments don't have to define us. They can transform us." And the best revenge against people who tried to break us is simply refusing to stay broken. Did the lady with the green suit stay broken, Mummy? No, sweetheart. She learned to build herself back differently. That's all any of us can do. And outside, the rain fell on Manhattan, on penthouses and homeless shelters, on CEO offices and community centers, on the powerful and the powerless, reminding everyone that storms come for us all. But after every storm, if we choose it, comes the chance to begin again.